The night was quiet, too quiet, as little Emily lay in her bed, hugging her worn-out teddy bear tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks in the dark. The house was silent, but it felt heavy, filled with unspoken rules and tension that seemed to hang over every room. Emily had tried to keep her feelings hidden all day, smiling when her mother Claire passed by and pretending everything was fine, while Victoria, her step-grandmother, hovered around, her eyes sharp and unyielding. Emily's heart was heavy, not just from the fear of Victoria's sudden anger, but from the loneliness she felt in her new family, where love seemed conditional and warmth was rare. She whispered into her pillow, telling it things she couldn't say out loud, secrets about her sadness, about the nights she wished someone would notice her, about the times she felt invisible even in her own home. Her words were soft, almost inaudible, but they carried the weight of weeks of quiet suffering, of longing for acceptance, and a gentle touch that would tell her she mattered. She didn't realize that Victoria, walking past the room to check on something, had heard the faint sobs, her eyes narrowing with irritation. Victoria had always believed that showing toughness would earn respect, that children needed discipline more than understanding, and tonight, something in Emily's soft cries triggered an impatient anger. She opened the door sharply, the frame casting a shadow over Emily, and demanded that she stop crying, her voice harsh, echoing in the small room. Emily flinched, startled, not expecting confrontation in her safe space, her little body shaking with a mixture of fear and hurt. When Victoria moved closer, frustration lining her face, she reached out impulsively and slapped Emily, a reaction born from anger rather than malice, though it left Emily stunned, her tears now mingled with shock and confusion. She curled up on the floor, clutching her chest, trying to catch her breath, feeling as though the world had suddenly become colder and scarier. Moments later, Claire rushed in, her heart racing as she saw her daughter trembling, her small body pressed against the floor, and panic gripped her chest. She gathered Emily into her arms, whispering soothing words and brushing her damp hair away from her face, her own tears threatening to spill as she realized how much pain her daughter had been holding inside. Emily's lips quivered as she tried to speak, to tell her mother the secret she had kept so long, the thoughts and feelings that had been quietly shaping her world. But her voice came out as a soft, broken whisper, barely audible over the thumping of her own heartbeat. The secret she had carried about feeling unloved and unseen seemed suddenly too heavy for her small body to hold, and Claire, sensing the depth of her daughter's anguish, pressed closer, promising protection and understanding, trying to shield her from the harshness that had invaded her bedroom. Victoria, standing at the doorway, watched in silence, her chest tight with an unfamiliar mix of guilt and defensiveness, the sharp anger fading into a complicated tangle of regret and worry. Emily's quiet sobs and whispered truths filled the room, and even though the night outside was dark and still, the atmosphere inside shifted, charged with emotion, with the kind of tension that only comes when unspoken feelings finally try to break free. In those hours, Emily realized that secrets, no matter how small, could weigh more than the heaviest burdens, and Claire understood that being present, listening, and showing empathy could sometimes heal more than scolding ever could. Victoria, meanwhile, felt the first cracks in the walls she had built around herself, walls of control and authority, beginning to tremble as she noticed the fragility and honesty of Emily's heart. The night stretched on, filled with whispered fears and soft promises, and though the family was far from perfect, for the first time, a thread of connection began to form, fragile but real, weaving itself between mother, daughter, and stepmother, hinting at a possibility of understanding, of warmth, of a new way forward. Emily's tears slowly lessened, replaced by a cautious hope that maybe, just maybe, someone could hear her, truly hear her, and that the secret she had carried so long would not define her, would not break her, and would instead become the beginning of something stronger, something built on care, attention, and the gentle courage of sharing what had been hidden in the dark. That night, the house felt different, not entirely safe yet, but alive with emotion, with the first steps of a story that would be messy, heartfelt, and filled with moments of both tension and tenderness. A story that promised growth, understanding, and the slow, careful building of trust where it had once been absent. And as Emily finally rested her head on the pillow, the warmth of her mother's arms around her, she realized that even in the hardest nights, when secrets felt too heavy to hold, love could still find its way through the cracks. Patient, steady, and persistent, waiting for hearts brave enough to reach out and claim it. The The hospital was cold and bright, its white walls reflecting the tension that filled the small waiting area as Claire paced, her hands clasped tightly, heart racing, and thoughts spinning with worry. Emily lay on the bed, pale but conscious, her tiny fingers curling around the edge of the blanket, still trembling from the shock and fear of the night before. Doctors and nurses moved with quiet efficiency, checking her vitals and making sure she was physically fine, but Claire's mind raced faster than any machine could measure. Emily's soft eyes followed her mother, filled with unspoken pain and a desperate longing to be understood, and Claire realized how much her daughter had been holding inside, how much loneliness and confusion had built up under the surface while the adults around her failed to notice. It was in that moment, in the sterile silence of the hospital room, that Emily's whispered secret finally came out, broken but clear. She felt invisible, unloved, and afraid, trapped between her longing for attention and the fear of provoking anger. She spoke slowly, her voice quivering, revealing feelings that had been buried for weeks. About nights spent crying alone, about wishing for someone to notice her small joys and small hurts, about wanting to be seen not just as a child in need of rules, but as someone with feelings that mattered. Claire's heart broke as she listened, tears streaming down her face, guilt and sorrow mixing with the fierce urge to protect her daughter. She held Emily's hand tightly, pressing gentle kisses to her forehead, whispering over and over that she loved her, that nothing would hurt her again, that the secret she had carried so long would no longer be a burden. Outside the hospital room, Victoria waited awkwardly, her posture stiff, hands clenched, unsure of how to enter or apologize, torn between pride and the first taste of genuine remorse she had ever felt for the way she had treated Emily. When she stepped inside, hesitant and careful, Emily turned her gaze toward her, eyes wide with fear and mistrust, and Victoria felt a pang of guilt sharper than any anger she had ever experienced. Claire guided Victoria closer, her own heart softening as she realized that forgiveness and understanding would take time, but were possible if all three of them tried. Emily, still fragile, felt the tension in the room, the mix of regret and hope, and slowly began to speak about small things that mattered to her, moments when she felt happy, things she wanted to do, times she had wished for someone to notice her efforts, even if they were tiny or seemingly unimportant. The conversation moved slowly at first, then gained momentum as if the words themselves were a kind of healing, creating a bridge between Emily and Victoria that had seemed impossible the night before. The doctors moved efficiently, monitoring Emily, but the real healing, the emotional repair, was happening in the quiet exchanges between mother, daughter, and stepmother as they navigated the fragile lines between anger, guilt, understanding, and love. Victoria, finally hearing Emily's perspective without judgment, felt a tenderness she had long buried, and for the first time she understood that discipline alone could never replace warmth, patience, and genuine care. Claire watched both of them, sensing the shift in energy, the cautious hope forming like the first sunlight after a long, stormy night, and she realized that this secret, painful as it had been, might become the key to building a stronger, more honest relationship in their blended family. Emily, still scared but feeling slightly lighter, allowed herself to rest her head on her mother's shoulder, taking comfort in the simple presence of someone who truly listened, and she noticed the hesitant smile of Victoria, small but real, signaling the beginning of change, the first step toward understanding. The hospital, with its clinical brightness, seemed almost warm in comparison to the emotional storm they had weathered. And in those moments, Emily understood that sharing her secret had been terrifying but necessary, that opening her heart, even in fear, could bring connection and protection she had longed for. As hours passed, Emily's energy slowly returned, her small body regaining warmth, her spirit slowly rebuilding in the gentle attention of her mother and the careful attempts at reconciliation from Victoria. Even in the quiet moments between words, a delicate bond formed, one built on trust slowly earned, the recognition of pain and the willingness to listen without judgment. Claire felt a mix of relief and determination, knowing that the path ahead would require patience, courage, and empathy from everyone, and she silently promised herself that no secret, no matter how small or painful, would go unheard again in her family. Victoria, though still uncomfortable with her own emotions, began to see Emily not as a child to control, but as a young girl whose heart needed gentle guidance, respect, and kindness, a realization that softened her demeanor and opened the door to a tentative reconciliation. Emily, feeling the first flickers of safety and acceptance, whispered thanks in her own quiet way, and though her voice was faint, the message was clear. She was ready to be seen, to be heard, and to let someone in. By the time the hospital staff checked her once more and reassured Claire that Emily was fine, the true healing had already begun, rooted not in medicine, but in the brave, emotional exchange of truths, in the willingness to face discomfort, regret, and fear, and in the fragile but undeniable thread of love that had started to weave its way between mother, daughter, and stepmother. And as they left the hospital, the night outside dark but calm, Emily held her mother's hand tightly, glancing at Victoria with cautious hope, knowing that the secret she had shared, the one that had caused shock and fear, had now become the bridge for understanding, the start of a story that would be emotional, heartfelt, and full of the slow, careful rebuilding of trust, love, and family. Days passed after Emily's hospital stay, and the house felt different, though not yet fully healed. The air carried a quiet tension, but also the first hints of hope. Emily's mother, Claire, stayed close, guiding her through small routines, ensuring she felt safe, while also gently encouraging Victoria to be patient and kind, to recognize that the smallest gestures could mean the world to a child who had felt invisible. At first, Victoria struggled, her pride in old habits making her stiff and awkward. She hovered near Emily, unsure of how to express care without seeming weak, but slowly, almost imperceptibly, she began to soften. She would ask about Emily's school day, notice the books she liked, comment on her drawings, or leave small notes of encouragement on her pillow. Emily noticed these gestures, feeling a mix of surprise, caution, and a growing curiosity about whether Victoria's heart could truly change. The little girl began to respond, first with tentative smiles, then with questions, and sometimes with a shy hug as she tested the waters of this new, fragile connection. Claire watched them carefully, feeling relief and pride as the wall of fear between Emily and Victoria started to crumble, though she also understood that one wrong word or harsh tone could undo all progress. Emily's heart, still tender from past nights of pain and fear, began to experience small sparks of trust and even affection toward Victoria, noticing moments of hesitation that hinted at regret, moments where Victoria seemed to wonder if she had been too harsh or impatient. One afternoon, as Emily sat by the window sketching quietly, Victoria approached and asked softly if she could join her, and Emily, surprised but willing, nodded. They spoke little at first, the conversation halting, yet the silence was no longer heavy. It was comfortable, shared, and respectful. Victoria told small stories about her own childhood, about mistakes she had made and lessons she had learned, and Emily listened, fascinated, seeing a different side to the woman who had once seemed unapproachable. In response, Emily shared some of her own thoughts and dreams, tentative at first, then with more courage, revealing hopes for friendship, understanding, and the warmth of a family where love could exist alongside rules. Slowly, the house began to change, as laughter returned in small bursts, as shared meals became moments of connection rather than tension, and as the three of them, mother, daughter, stepmother, began to navigate the complex path toward emotional closeness. Victoria, too, started to experience an unfamiliar tenderness, a softening of her heart toward Emily that surprised her. She realized that love and care could coexist with guidance, and that being gentle did not make her weak, it made her human. Emily noticed the subtle changes, the quiet attention, the way Victoria lingered to ask if she was okay, or to listen without judgment when she spoke. And these gestures created a fragile sense of safety that Emily had longed for in silence. Claire felt hope, though she remained cautious, knowing that building trust was a slow process and that the past could cast shadows over even the kindest moments. One evening, as Emily rested her head against Victoria's shoulder, the stepmother's hand brushing Emily's hair back, a soft and unexpected warmth spread through the room, a quiet acknowledgement of progress, of understanding, and of the beginnings of a bond that could endure. Emily's heart swelled with a cautious joy, recognizing that someone she had feared might hurt her again was now offering care, attentiveness, and the willingness to connect. Victoria, feeling the weight of responsibility and the unexpected depth of affection she had developed for Emily, whispered gently about mistakes, apologies, and hope for the future, her voice carrying sincerity and vulnerability. And Emily, listening, felt a new sense of courage, realizing that people could change and that forgiveness could open doors she had never imagined. Claire observed silently, her heart full, grateful for the steps forward, knowing that healing was not only about fixing past mistakes, but about creating consistent, compassionate actions that reinforced trust every day. Emily began to share more, talking about school, her friends, small fears and little joys, and Victoria responded with interest and patience, a dynamic that grew slowly, naturally, and beautifully, building a rhythm of care that felt genuine rather than forced. Even the small arguments that arose now were different. They were tempered with understanding and empathy, not anger or harsh discipline, and each resolution, each small act of listening, reinforced the fragile bond between them. Nights became easier, less lonely, as Emily felt a subtle but undeniable protection from both her mother and Victoria, sensing that she could rely on them, that her feelings mattered, and that the secret of her loneliness and fear had been transformed into the foundation for love and trust. By the end of these days, Emily laughed more freely, her steps lighter, her spirit brighter, and though moments of doubt and hesitation remained, the fragile threads of connection wove themselves into something resilient and hopeful. Victoria, too, discovered an unexpected joy in guiding and protecting Emily, a pride that was tempered by humility and a new understanding of what family truly meant. Not control or obedience, but empathy, patience, and consistent care. Claire watched with relief as the house, once heavy with unspoken tension, slowly became a place of warmth, where conversation, gentle guidance, and laughter began to coexist. Emily felt seen in ways she had never imagined. Victoria felt a new depth of affection she had not allowed herself before, and Claire felt a quiet satisfaction in seeing both hearts open slowly, cautiously, yet with genuine intention. That fragile bridge of understanding that had begun in whispered secrets and tears was now carrying them toward a new reality, one where mistakes could be acknowledged, emotions could be expressed safely, and love could be shown openly, creating hope that the family could finally move forward together. And yet, there was still a lingering awareness that trust had to be nurtured, that the past could echo in unexpected moments, and that the journey to emotional closeness was ongoing, requiring courage, patience, and vulnerability from all three. In those quiet, tender days, Emily learned that speaking her truth, even when it was scary, could lead to change. And Victoria learned that caring for someone else's heart could awaken feelings she had long suppressed, while Claire understood that her role as mother was not just to protect, but to guide, to listen, and to allow love to grow in its own time. The house, once filled with tension, now carried the first signs of warmth and hope, and the three of them, though imperfect, were beginning to build a family that could withstand pain, misunderstandings, and fear, united by honesty, attention, and the fragile, steady power of care that had grown from the secret Emily had shared, a secret that had once caused shock, but now promised the slow, deliberate healing of hearts and the possibility of genuine love. Months passed, and the house that had once felt heavy and tense began to breathe with quiet warmth, the air carrying hints of laughter, understanding, and the fragile but growing bonds between Emily, her mother Claire, and step-grandmother Victoria. Emily had slowly regained her confidence, her small smiles returning, her eyes shining with cautious hope, and she began to share her thoughts more freely, speaking about her school, her friends, her dreams, and even the small worries that had once kept her awake at night. Claire noticed the difference immediately, feeling relief and gratitude that her daughter's heart was healing, and she continued to nurture this transformation by encouraging honest conversation, gentle reassurance, and daily reminders that Emily was loved and valued. Victoria, too, had changed in ways that surprised her. The harshness and impatience that had once defined her interactions with Emily had softened into patience, curiosity, and a genuine desire to connect, and the little moments of care she now showed, asking about Emily's day, noticing her small accomplishments, or simply sitting beside her quietly, began to rebuild trust that had been shaken the night of the hospital visit. Emily, sensing these shifts, allowed herself to respond, first with tentative smiles, then with shy words, and finally with small acts of affection, such as leaning into Victoria's shoulder, sharing a drawing she had made, or laughing at a story Victoria told about her own childhood. Claire observed these moments quietly, feeling her heart swell with hope, knowing that the path to a stronger family was not through perfection, but through patience, understanding, and consistent, kind actions that spoke louder than any reprimand ever could. Slowly, routines became moments of connection rather than conflict. Shared breakfasts became times for stories and laughter, homework sessions included encouragement and gentle guidance, and evenings were spent with Emily snuggled close to her mother or step-grandmother, the warmth of human connection replacing the cold tension that had once filled every corner. One afternoon, Emily, sitting on the living room floor, looked up at Victoria and whispered, "Thank you for listening to me." And Victoria felt a swell of emotion, a tenderness that surprised her, realizing that the love she had once denied herself could now extend freely to this small, brave girl who had endured so much quietly. That simple moment carried more meaning than any apology could, as it symbolized trust, recognition, and the fragile beginnings of a bond that had once seemed impossible. Days flowed into weeks, and even small challenges were handled with care. Disagreements were softened with calm explanations, mistakes were met with guidance rather than punishment, and the family began to navigate the delicate balance of respect, understanding, and affection. Emily found herself laughing more, playing more, and opening her heart to moments of joy that had once seemed unreachable. She realized that a family could be imperfect, yet still full of love, that people could change, and that patience and honesty could heal wounds deeper than anyone realized. Victoria, for her part, discovered that her role in Emily's life was not to control or dominate, but to nurture, support, and protect. And each small success, the shared laughter, the quiet understanding, the moments when Emily ran to her for comfort, reinforced a growing sense of fulfillment, connection, and even unexpected affection. Claire, observing both, felt a deep, quiet pride, knowing that the challenges they had faced, the harsh words, the hospital visit, the nights of whispered fears, had become the foundation for a stronger, more empathetic family, one built on courage, communication, and the willingness to listen and change. The evenings, once heavy with unspoken tension, now carried the gentle rhythm of harmony, the soft chatter of shared meals, the quiet reading together, the occasional playful teasing, and the comfortable silences that only come when people feel safe with one another. Emily began to look forward to these moments, feeling a sense of belonging she had never truly experienced. And Victoria began to see herself not as a disciplinarian, but as a guardian of Emily's heart, someone capable of love, warmth, and gentle guidance, realizing that her own emotional growth had been intertwined with the child's journey. One night, as Emily rested her head on Victoria's shoulder while Claire sipped tea nearby, Emily whispered about a dream she had, a story about a family that faced hardship but grew stronger together, and Victoria felt tears prick her eyes, recognizing that the dream reflected their own lives, the pain of the past transforming into hope, understanding, and resilience. The secret Emily had once cried about, the fear and isolation that had led to shock and worry, now became the catalyst for connection, dialogue, and emotional growth, proving that vulnerability, honesty, and careful attention could mend even fractured relationships. Claire felt a deep sense of relief, watching Emily flourish, seeing Victoria change, and understanding that love did not always come easily, but when nurtured, it could flourish, bringing people closer and creating a safe, caring home. Emily laughed freely, Victoria smiled more openly, and Claire's heart felt full as she recognized that the family they were building was no longer defined by fear, misunderstanding, or past mistakes, but by mutual respect, empathy, and the shared courage to face emotions honestly. The house, once tense and heavy, now carried the soft sounds of healing, footsteps echoing gently, conversations flowing without judgment, moments of quiet reflection shared across the living room, and the gentle rhythm of life that comes when people are willing to love and listen with patience and care. Emily's small victories, her renewed confidence, and her willingness to share thoughts and feelings reflected a transformation that could only have happened through the deliberate, gentle work of love, trust, and understanding. Victoria's patience, her willingness to change, and her growing warmth showed that even those who once struggled with control could learn empathy and tenderness. And Claire's steadfast guidance ensured that the family remained grounded, supportive, and attentive to each other's hearts. And as they moved through the days, facing challenges, joys, and quiet triumphs, the story of the night when Emily cried a secret and the step-grandmother reacted with anger became a memory that no longer brought fear, but a lesson in resilience, emotional courage, and the slow, careful building of love. In the end, the three of them, mother, daughter, stepmother, found a rhythm that was imperfect but deeply human. A family bound not just by obligation, but by understanding, care, and the conscious choice to nurture one another's hearts. And though the journey had begun in tears and shock, it blossomed into a life of shared joy, connection, and the enduring promise that love, honesty, and empathy could overcome fear, distance, and past mistakes, creating a home where hearts could heal, grow, and flourish together.